Network Automation Nerds podcast. Hello and welcome to Network Automation Nerds podcast, a podcast about network automation, network engineering, Python, and other technology topics. I'm your host, Eric Cho. Today on the show, we'll continue our conversation with Tim Bertino. He is an awesome human being, and I hope you caught what he said last week about just his career path, being business savvy as well as technology savvy, having a kind of a T-shaped knowledge for a wider base, but also specialize in some of the things that you feel passionate about. So where we left off last week was he was telling us about how he tries to be wider and speaks a business language where he kind of innovate within the company and get justification for his actions and projects um, and that. So, Tim, do you want to continue that, or do you want to kind of take into a different direction and talk about your passion projects?
I think we can jump into the passion projects.
Okay, awesome, cool. So, what are some of the things that you do right now? So, obviously, one of them is this awesome podcast called The Art of Network Engineering, and that's actually taking up a lot of your time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think I said on last week's show that with my career, I've had this lucky streak of falling into just the right situations. So
Yeah. Well, I think you're too humble. I think and just from listening to you last week, right? You took initiative, and when the director asked you about, what are you doing, and here's your goals, and you actually achieved them, you went back to him and said, here you go, I've achieved them. So that's one of the things that you did.
I
That was
appreciate that.
impressive.
As far as the podcast, so we can talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
I again got lucky there. They already had an established brand and had an opening for somebody to jump in and be part of it. So I'll tell you, I was such a big fan of that show when it started that I knew after listening to, I think the first episode, I reached out over email and got a hold of AJ and started talking to him and the rest of the team right away. And I knew early on, I'm like, I want to be a part of this somehow. And so I worked with AJ and I started by writing some blogs on the Art of Network Engineering website. And then eventually they had me on for an episode. And I had this kind of ulterior motive in the back of my head that's like, all right, I'm going to use this as an audition because I want to be on this show. And so
you want to impress them.
Yeah, that's nice. What I went a little hard.
Impress you did, right?
And I just, when I do things like this, like in last week's episode, I flipped the script a little bit and asked you a question. That's kind of my contribution to when I get on these podcasts is I tend to have more questions than answers in most topics. So I like being the question guy. And that's one of the things I did in that first episode that I was on in the Art of Network Engineering is I hit a point in the show and said, hey, I actually got a question for each one of you. And the flow went really well. And obviously the rest is history. So that is a passion project that I fell into. I mean, that really, the credit for that show really goes to AJ, Andy, and Dan and Aaron for starting that. And myself and Lexi got brought on later on, and you all know Lexi. She is an amazing communicator. She's got a great personality. She's got this drive to learn and continue to learn. So honestly, we've got a really good flow. Like we talked about in our last week's episode, we talked about culture. I mean, that goes from the workplace to outside of the workplace. We just feel like we've got a really good flow going. And so as far as we got the podcast, and another thing that I would say that I'm becoming more and more passionate about, that who knows, maybe someday I can spin it into a side hustle. Cause I think we were going to kind of compare and contrast what a passion project and a side hustle is writing. I've found that I'm really passionate about writing. It's got kind of a low barrier to entry. I've been trying to think of how do I get myself out there? I'm now on the podcast, but I I don't really do, well, I can't even say really. I don't do like YouTube videos. I don't do like any editing like that. I'm like,
Well,
what
you
can
will be
I
on my YouTube channel, you know
I'll be
that,
on yours, yeah,
right?
but I don't do any of this on my own. I rely
Yeah,
on others
yeah, yeah.
to pull me in.
Yeah.
But so I said, what can I do to kind of put myself out there outside of just social media? And I found that writing is a good outlet for that. So I'm writing a lot on my own site, netication.com, and
Mhm.
then artofnetworkengineering.com as well. And also for events like networking field day, that gives me opportunities to write more. So I found that I've become really passionate about that, and it's something that I can do on a regular basis, and it's been good. Maybe that'll turn into something someday.
I'm sure you will, but, I'm just curious, you mean you can't express all of your thoughts in 140 characters or
No.
No.
No, I cannot, and I find myself doing that all the time where I will probably spend more time trying to plan out what the tweet is gonna say
Yeah.
and
Oh my
backspace,
god.
backspace, no, take that out because I can't get my whole thought into there,
Yeah.
and, oh, I need to have the right hashtags to make sure everybody sees this that needs to. It's stressful, man.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, when I try to do a tweet, I try to paste in, like, the link first because
Uh,
those are, like, the must,
that's
right?
the same thing I do.
Yeah,
Yep.
and then I work backwards and go, "Oh, -20, so maybe I should have a shorthand here, maybe I shouldn't include that hashtag." But it's very, very tough, and it's a different forms of communication, right? So that's what it is, and it's deliberate. But tell me what do you like about writing? Because that's one of my passion project too.
What do I like about writing?
Yeah, or maybe over, like, just a podcast, form or, maybe just like a tweet or, yeah, I'm just kinda curious.
Yeah, I think as far as writing, I'm big into blogs right now, and I
Yep.
think that it's a good way for me to articulate what's really in my head,
Yeah.
and it's another method of doing that than on the podcast. The podcast is great, and we've been looking at things like that whole speech to text to try to get things more optimized so people can search and find
Yeah.
specific episodes. But when something is starting off as text, like a blog article, it's easy once that's out on the internet. It's easy for those search engines to find it. And if somebody is looking for something that you have written, it's all about being able to help people too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I always usually when I look at doing a new initiative, I try to find that win-win because yes, I like helping people. We've talked about writing and donating blood and all that kind of stuff, but
Yep.
you also need to look out for yourself too. So I try to find those win-wins, and writing is a good outlet for me because it gives me the opportunity to practice, the written word, get better at that because you need that skill in many different careers, and if you can articulate what you want to say in the written form, I think that that's a great thing. And so to be able to practice that, plus be able to maybe help somebody else. I've run across, I don't know how many people in the IT communities that have helped me get over a hump of an issue I'm working on.
Yeah.
Something that I've needed help with. I know Zig Zigga has helped me. I was trying to do some wireless ACLs within Cisco controllers at one point, and it's a little bit different animal than regular wired ACLs, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I just Googled something and I found one of his blog posts, and
Right.
it just put how it's set up in perspective to me to where I could understand it. So I hope that my writing can eventually do that with other people. And I always make it an effort too, because Eric, you're a content creator, both writing and podcasts and
Mhm.
YouTube. That stuff takes time, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's something that you're investing your own time and often your own dollars into. So when I come across something like that that helps me, I always try to reach out to that content creator and say, hey, you put this out there. It may have been years ago, but you put this out there. I came across it. It really helped me. I know it's always good for me when somebody reaches out and says, "Hey, we heard this episode of the podcast. It really helped us. I'm now doing X, Y, and Z because of that." I mean, that's just such a cool feeling.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the point that you made was really resonated with me was how writing is how you get to organize your own thoughts and how do you tell it in a logical way so other people could follow along. And also, you mentioned this. I'm gonna paraphrase that and say writing is still the best way to compound your influence. I mean, I
Hmm.
know we're very much visual, we're very much audio in podcasts and videos and so on. But when you do a search or when you go back to something, I think the written format, because as you alluded to, that you're trying to have the text to speech for your podcast, because that's still the best way to organize information. And when you're reading something, it's inherently slower, so your brain is processing at the same time. So for me, it seems like, I don't know if it's because I'm old or but it's just a better way to absorb. So I too feel like writing is a great way to first organize your thought, and then the compounding factor, as you mentioned, maybe you were searching something and Zig's blog popped up, that was years ago, and that was still being beneficial to the community, to you or to somebody else.
It definitely. And another thing for having a blog, we talked a little bit about it in the last episode of putting yourself out there on social media and having that kind of public presence I think will help you in multiple ways. Like the writing, like I said, you practice writing, you're going to get better at it over time. But now you also have this living reference
Yep.
for people to find that may be interested in something similar and maybe gaining benefit from it. But back to that win-win scenario, you can now put on your resume a link to your own website that potential employers can see and say, wow, this person is really passionate. They actually take their own time to document these different things. And it just, I think it shows you in a really good light for potential employers.
Yeah, for sure. So which platform would you recommend? Because a lot of times when people say, "Oh, I should do a blog," and they get stuck on the analyzing which platform to use,
Yes.
and then uh, and then they just never get started. Because we all have like certain amount of attention span, attention amount of energy. If you spend that on just deciding the platform, it takes away from the time you get started. So which platform do you recommend or use?
First off, I am that person. I am the habitual overthinker. So when I first started to get into blogging, I think it was on via Packet Pushers.
Okay,
It was Greg Farrow who was talking about the importance of writing and putting your thoughts out there.
right.
And I think he gave that advice of try
Along with
not to
like 10 other
overthink it.
snarky comments.
Yeah, there was probably some of that there, but
Yeah, yeah.
to try not to overthink it because
Yeah,
um, you will try to be perfect all the time,
yep,
and that wanting to be perfect will stop you from being good because
yeah,
you won't ever put anything out there if you're waiting for it to be
yeah,
perfect. And I know myself, like I was talking about the YouTube thing earlier. I'm not a video editor. I'm not an audio editor, but I can write. And I
mhm,
wanted to do something that would give me the ability to do that as quickly as possible. The whole
yep.
kind of fail fast, fail often kind of thing. So I think it was the recommendation from Greg was just get into something like WordPress, a
Yep,
hosted WordPress. So
yep,
you don't have to run your own server and manage all that yourself. It's the beauty of software as a service offerings, right? You can jump into something quick. It's fairly low cost. It walks you through the entire process of getting your own web domain and registering it. You can do all of that from WordPress online. So that's what I jumped into, and
nice.
I find it to be a low cost, really kind of low tech. You can make it look as nice or not nice as you want. I'm not, like I said, I'm not an audio or video editor. I'm also not a web designer. So
You're
mine
more functional.
yeah, mine is, it works and it's pretty bare bones, but it gets the job done. And I'm glad I had that advice because it got me into writing quickly, and I can focus on the actual content versus trying to be perfect in every other aspect.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the way that the brain works is if you're deciding on the platform, your brain will fool yourself into thinking you're making progress, but you're not really making any outputs, right? Like you're still a consumer of a lot of things, that you're not a producer of content. So yeah, like what you said, Tim, just get out there, right? I know my first platform was Blogger, and that was back in like 2010, 2011. And Blogger was owned by Google, and the content is still out there. But and then later on, I wanted to learn more about CMS, content management system.
Okay.
In particular, wanted to do Python related. So like that was a way for me to gain knowledge and have a goal in front of me. So I got into
We will
Wagtail,
pause the
which
programming
is
with
like
a
a
special
Python
sponsor
Django
message
based
from me, your
content
host,
management
Eric.
system, which is
Hey guys,
coincidentally
when it comes to
what
network
the
automation, have you thought
I
about
forgot
joining a group of
the full
like-minded
name, but
people
essentially
to
it's
ask
the
questions and
British
get the support you need? I would like to invite you to the
the
network
British
automation learning community.
like a
It is free to
medical,
join
like they
in
have
a low
the
pressure,
government
safe
backed
place to post
medical
questions,
system,
get
right? So
answers,
that
and
is
just
what
hang out.
their
You can sign up at
system was run on. So I was like, oh, well, you know, Wagtail is good enough for
members.networkautomation.community.
that, then
The
it's good
link
enough
is
for
also
my
in the show
like
notes.
5-page
Now
blog
back
post.
to regular programming.
So I try to learn that and try to containerize that and so on. But like you said, it was get started and get the output going and get the benefit, right? You start compounding that whatever it is that you're looking for, and start compounding that versus having a analysis paralysis.
Yeah, yeah, that's the phrase I was trying to think of. And the quote, I don't know who started this originally. The quote I was trying to think of before is perfect is the enemy of good.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
you strive to be perfect in everything you do. Now there's a time and place for that. There are certain things that you want to make sure you take time to plan out before you just jump in. But having a website doing blogging is something that I think you can just jump into, start getting content out there, and you can make your website better over time. I've started kind of trying to organize my posts, because originally it was just get it out there and it's all listed out however it is. So now I'm starting to kind of organize things, tag things, so I can display different things on different pages. So one of the things I'm writing about right now is I'm doing these learning journeys. So I've done
Hmm.
a couple of certifications recently that, as I hit a topic that I find interesting or that I want to kind of cement more in my head, is I'll
Yep.
write a blog post about it, and then I'll string them all together, and it'll just be, it's an easy way. It's an easy way to get content. I don't have to rack my brain for creative ideas. I just go through what I'm learning, and it gets, and again, it helps cement those ideas, helps you learn. It also, again, helps you practice writing. So it's wins all around.
Yeah, teaching is learning twice. So I was gonna say, like, you don't have to ask ChatGPT what to write next.
Yep.
And actually, it does a pretty good job too, right? I don't know if you tried it, but like I would say, what are the top 10 blog posts a network engineer should write? And you go, well, the top 10 posts, you should do this, and then
Wow.
yeah, so it's pretty scary at the same time, but it actually does a pretty good job too. I mean, that's what I would do if you're running out of ideas. I would just add ChatGPT and be as specific as you want, and they'll give you like a pretty good answer.
So I'm going to do my normal podcast deflecting.
Yes,
Can
go
I
for it.
ask you a question before you have the opportunity to ask me the question?
Yeah, for sure. Go for it. And by
So
the
one of
way,
the-
I just looked it up. The perfect is the enemy of good. Of good is apparently it came from French, and there's a French proverb. But if and it's attributed to, I can't even pronounce his name, but I'll put the link.
Okay.
Léonie de Buen Estelabion. So
Well, that's good. I was worrying that I dreamed that at some point. I can't remember. I think it was somebody on one of the podcast episodes or in the community or something that mentioned that, and I think it was in reference to just getting out there and blogging, because I think people have that. It's like kind of back to that imposter syndrome
for
type
sure.
thing,
For
where
sure.
it's like, what am I going to write? I may have an idea for one post, but I'm not going to start a website just for that one post and then, maybe never have a good idea ever again. I mean, you just start getting just into this debilitating cycle. And
what if people don't like it? Well,
exactly. Well, who cares? Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
If you're going to benefit from it, or potentially other people might benefit from it. I mean, again, back to the podcast, and I'm sure you're in the same boat, because you've got a quality show here. Is you put out this content not knowing when the team started Art of Network Engineering, they didn't know anybody was going to listen, and they were even wondering if it was a good idea to do it. And then I tell you, some of these LinkedIn messages, Twitter messages, emails that come in that show that somebody listened and said, "Hey, you really helped me out here because of this, this, and this." You never know who your perspective may impact. You got to give yourself a chance.
Yep.
So my question, before you can ask me.
Okay.
So what we're talking about today, what do you see as the difference between a passion project and a side hustle?
Well, I posted that question in our show notes. As soon as I put that, I thought to myself, I don't have a good answer, but I actually don't see a difference between a passion project and a side hustle. The only difference I see is a path to monetization. So I would say a side hustle, just the word hustle kind of implies monetary. So ideally you can marry the two. So like you said, right, like if your writing could eventually turn into something that would benefit you monetarily, besides just putting that feather in your hat, or something else, then that's great. Or if your video, starts to make money for ad, you didn't start it out. I bet you didn't start it out thinking you'll have sponsors, or AJ and the gang started thinking out that we're gonna make a living or some retirement funds from the podcast. But eventually they did, and that's great. And that merges, kind of blurs the line between passion projects and side hustles. I don't know if you have like I'm sure you have a better answer. But
that's why I made sure I asked you before you could ask me.
Yeah, so that's kind of my answer. I think the line between monetization, but again, I don't think there's a big line, because a lot of these side hustles starts from passion project, and then you start saying, what if I could just do this for a living, right? What if Tim could just blog for a living, and and now that he has multiple streams of income, then that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that there's a lot of similarities between the two. I mean, just by name, passion project seems like it's something that you care so much about, something that you just want to do it, whether you're going to monetize it or not. You really enjoy putting your time and effort into it. And in side hustle, I see is definitely monetization, something that you think you can make money off of. And I think it's typically, I could be wrong, but at least knowing people in the different IT communities, I think side hustles are typically something that you can make money on, that you're at least somewhat interested in.
Right.
I don't know how many people are doing side hustles that it's just purely to make money. They don't like doing it. They just do it as
that would be a pretty terrible way to spend your time.
So yeah, I do think that there are a lot of similarities between the two. And I guess the gold standard would be is if, like you said, if you can have that passion project, something that you love to do, that you can make money or make a living out of. I mean, that's the dream, right?
Yeah, so I think the side hustle will also implies, because it's monetary. So then there's the cost benefit analysis, right? Like, how much am I paying to host this platform versus how much ad revenue I'm bringing in or whatnot. So so that is like the whole other realms, and you're talking about product market fit. You're talking about again, your asset versus your liabilities, and how much cash flow is it self-sustaining. And God forbid you have to go, form an LLC or whatnot, just to separate the tax implication, because Uncle Sam needs a piece of your income, right? So, but all of that is worth it, in my opinion. That it's something that if you find interesting, like I do and you do with writing, then it's a great way to just kind of spend your time and kind of have this. I'm gonna throw in synergy. I don't know if that is people's gonna blow up at me and go, "How dare you put in more keywords in that?" But yeah, that's my belief.
So I'm going to bring up three things
Go ahead.
that you are or have worked on, and I want you to tell me
Yeah.
what you think of those three. Are they side hustles or passion projects?
Okay.
So
Oh,
your
please. That's interesting.
your your book that I have
Yep.
on my shelf is number one.
Oh, nice.
This podcast would be number
Okay.
two,
Okay.
and number three, I'm going to say your education, because you're in school right now.
Yep. Yep.
So break apart those three for me. What are those three individually?
So I think the book started out as a passion project, and it's something I would have done regardless of how much I get paid, and that eventually turned out into a bigger success than I anticipated. Then it veers into the side hustle realm where our benchmark was monetization, right? So I actually formed a single member LLC for all the content creations that I could keep track of and have it as a pass through entity uh, for mainly for tax purposes and for all these other
Okay.
stuff. So that's kind of a passion project going to a side hustle. Um, the second one you mentioned was this podcast, and this is definitely a passion project. It is something that I don't anticipate taking any revenues, but at the same time, it would probably, I guess, just further the reach and then kind of, give me a chance to talk to awesome people like yourself, an excuse to reach out and say, hey, let's chat a little bit. And I've talked about this more also in previous episodes. It really is like broaden the horizon for myself and open up ideas that I have never had, didn't have access to. So that's I would categorize as a passion project. And then the third one is, what was the third one?
Third one was school.
Oh,
You're
school. Yeah,
now
then
remind me, is it a master's program you're going through?
it is. It's a
Okay.
Master of Entrepreneurship. So I think that kind of it's neither, I would say. It's kind of just something that I've always wanted to do. And after 20 years, I finally had the guts to just say, go do it. I mean, it's very taxing. It's just puts a lot of stress on my full daytime job, on my family, on everything else I've done. But it's something that I've enjoyed. So it's neither, I would say, but at the same time, it's both because it enhances my thinking and mindsets for both of them. So for like, whether think in terms of like I said, business mindsets and profit P&L sheets and profit losses and cash flow and all of that, then it gives me a more clarity on a lot of things that I have in mind, and as far as the direction to go. So, well, thank you for bringing that. I mean, I never thought of it that way. And at the same time, again, this is like a good way to just brainstorm, right? Like gets more clarity as we talk more. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you bet. Would you say, now I think the third one might be a little bit different, the master's program, but
Yep.
would you say that writing the book and doing the podcast were similar motivations to get started?
It's a little bit different because I think for the book, I really I really wrote the book for intention of um, teaching my experience so that other people won't repeat it. And when the first edition came out, there was no similar book out there, and there was no DevNet, right? And there was not a lot of automation going on, and I wanted to validate this concept, and I wanted to validate and to put a stick in the ground, say, I, Eric Cho, believe this is the way to go, and here are all the paths that I've done and all the mistakes I've made. If you were like me, believe in what in this concept, then take a look at these projects and to help others. So that was really the motivation for this podcast slash YouTube channel. It was really for more personal, selfish reason of I'm trying to change my relationship with the community. So I wanted to be more of a facilitator. I wanted to promote others. I see all these awesome people, yourself, um, you know, uh, Kirk Byers, and a lot of many other people who have done great stuff in the community that I think I should shed a light on. Other materials that I want to do. So I wanted to change my relationship with the community and become a facilitator and just promote others. So those are two different motivations. So I don't think there's a clear line drawn between the two, but even though they're both content creation, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think you and I are very similar in
Mm-hmm.
that latter regard of we like to be behind the microphone, but we don't necessarily like to be that center of attention.
No, yeah.
We like to promote others. We like to ask questions, which I don't know how much you appreciate now having me on, because you brought me on as a guest, and I just do my normal thing and just throw a bunch of questions at you. But
I could never get
I
tired
like
talking
how
about
we're
myself.
flowing here.
No, you're boosting my ego. So I don't know if I could, like, after the podcast, I don't know if I get through my bedroom, my study door, because my head is just growing too big now. So I need to shrink it back and say, now, Tim, tell me, what do you feel? Well, I'm gonna ask you the same question. What do you think? The difference between passion projects and side hustle. You already said monetization. So why do you think it's important to have passion projects, for example?
I think it's important to have passion projects because myself, I always feel now, right, wrong, or indifferent,
Sure.
whether this is good or bad, you can take it for what it's worth. I always feel like to lead a strong and happy life, I feel like I have to have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And doing content creation, interacting with the community, doing the podcast on top of my work life and my wonderful family, it gives me a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Writing does, and that's where I find writing to be a passion project, because it gives me that outlet to do that. And I have this pie in the sky pipe dream that someday, when maybe when the kids are grown up and they're taking care of me versus the vice versa, that I might want to get into writing fiction someday. That always seemed something that
Oh,
seemed kind of
yeah.
cool. I don't know
Yeah.
what, but I always thought that would be kind of something cool someday. So that's another kind of pie in the sky selfish reason that I do the technical blogging is, if I can do anything to help just writing in general, maybe someday I'll become creative and I'll already have a decent base to write a fiction novel or something.
Let's put that in our like a spreadsheet. This is like semi-permanent, right? So many years from now, when you have like a top seller on Amazon in the fiction
There
category,
we go.
yeah, then we'll be like, man, told you so. Like whenever this will be air, we'll be like, mark that date.
Yeah,
That
you
was
heard it
when
here first on Network
exactly you
Automation Nerds
heard it here
podcast.
first. Yeah, I don't even know, not know, but like I don't remember his full name, but he goes by Pi Denny, and he's the author of Two Scoops of Django, and I think he has a few fiction and science fiction, so it kind of fits, right?
Yeah,
Technology
for sure.
and death, and then he writes science fiction, so it's a very noble aspiration. I wish you the best of luck. I mean, I'll be the first to make a copy to
I
order a copy.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, you sent me your book a while back. I'll send you mine.
Okay. All right. Cool.
I'll send you my book that may never happen.
I'm sure you will, man. I'm sure you will, and it'll be like top seller and hot new releases. But even if it doesn't, right? Like, I mean, even though we say that, but even if it doesn't, um, it doesn't happen that way, it's still a great achievement, right? It's just having that out there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there are certain things that we can do that, even if they aren't quote successful,
Yep.
we're
By
still
whose
not out
standard?
anything, because you're still practicing writing. Like
Right.
certifications are
Right.
another good one. That
Right.
if you put the work in and you're really trying to study and trying to learn, not just necessarily just pass a test, you're actually trying to learn,
Yeah.
and you go into that certification and you fail, yes,
Yeah.
that sucks,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still better for what you did in preparing for that. You still learned something. One of the things that I thought was great when I was preparing for the CCNP, the Cisco Enterprise Core exam, is
Mm-hmm.
that I was hitting things that were directly applicable in my work life. There was one thing where it was OSPF, and it was talking about, I was learning how to go in and leverage the different debug commands, and how, if an adjacency is not coming up and you aren't sure, you're not seeing anything in the logs, you can pop open the debug IPOSPF adjacency to see if you might have an MTU mismatch. Right. And I actually ran into something like that almost right after I learned that. So
am I glad I made this investment?
Exactly. So I could have gone in and failed that test, and it would have sucked, but I was still better for spending the time on that. So I think that's something that you can use to kind of combat imposter syndrome, is that as long as you're in trying to better yourself, you're going to fall down, you're going to fail. But as long as you keep getting back up, what do we always say? Sorry, another plug for the podcast. It's all about the journey.
It's all about the journey, baby. Yeah. And you did not fail that test. Is that the one that you passed right before a major holiday?
Yeah, so that one,
I was rooting for you because I was like, oh, that would be horrible.
It was like the day before Thanksgiving. So I'm like, Thanksgiving's either going to be awesome or it's going to suck. But I will go back to, it's just how I approach certification exams. So there are people that could prepare for Enterprise Core or any of the other Cisco exams or CompTIA or whatever. They could prepare for them in a matter of weeks or whatever. I don't take that approach. I'm very much a tortoise in the hare, slow and steady kind of thing. I like to make sure I grasp all those concepts, and I'm doing all the review that I can. And it has paid off. I was able to get through the Enterprise Core and the concentration exam both on the first try. And I equate it to, I found my style, right? I think that's another thing too, with both in studying and in your career. Find your pace, find your style that works for you. It's okay to be an individual. You don't have to follow the path of others.
Yeah. Path less traveled. And there goes another proverb there.
There you go. Man, we are so philosophical today.
We're on the road. We're moving from like high school, high school CAT program to all the way to the purpose of life in the span of like an hour and 10 minutes. I love
this
that.
Is excellent.
It's all about the journey.
Yep.
Well, on that happy note, Tim, before we say goodbye, where can, let me ask you this, any call to action for people listening?
Call to action, I would say, whether you're just starting out in the IT field or you've been in it a while, I highly recommend you to invest in yourself. Now that can mean many different things. That can mean certifications, but it doesn't have to. That's one thing that I've always had a strong voice of, is I've had a love-hate relationship with IT certifications over my career. That is not the only way. You see people jumping on social media all the time saying, I passed this, I passed that. Yeah. It's a great way to learn, and it's a great way to grow your career, but it's not the only way. Some people, including myself, don't like tests, and they would rather gain experience other ways. That's fine. Blog, lab, just go out and learn things. As long as you continue to invest in yourself, you're going to reap those dividends over time.
That's awesome. I love that call to action. So where can people find you if they want more of the Tim Bertino? That's what AJ says, right? Like Tim Bertino experience.
Oh man. You might need a few beers before you jump into the Tim Bertino experience, but
done. It's always 5 o'clock summer. So where can people find you on social?
It sure is. Twitter at Tim Bertino. You can search me on LinkedIn, find me there. I blog at the artofnetworkengineering.com and netication.com. I'm always dropping my blogs on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome. I will obviously include those in the show notes, and I'm sure the listener will let me know if I miss a link or two, and I'll promptly get this link filled up.
And if you'll allow me to use your platform again, I think I should write you a check after this. But if you're either up and coming or you've been in the IT field for a long time, if you have a social presence, check out techfieldday.com if you want to look at being a delegate. That team is incredible, and you'll get a lot out of it. Check it out.
Yeah, you shouldn't write me a check. We should send the bill to
We'll send it
Field
to
Day.
Tom. Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, send it to Tom. All right, done. I'm not sure. I'm sure he'll like, who's this guy? Like, you've never heard of like this podcast, whatever. All right, cool. Well, thanks again, Tim. It's been a super pleasure. I enjoy our conversation. I can't believe time flew by so fast. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Network Automation Nerds podcast. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other podcast platforms. Until next time, bye-bye.